Yeah, so just like a little basic background on you before we get started.
Sure. I live in the Dalles with my husband and our two cats, and we've been here about 10 years now this year. And one of the things that drew me out to Eastern Oregon is we are both actually very active hikers and backpackers. And so I'm also a kayaker and cyclist. So it's kind of a lot of outdoor activities, and I really enjoy the Dalles. I had known about the Dalles, actually a lot of this district, actually through my previous background in tourism.
Hmm.
So I had worked, even though I was in Portland, I understood the importance of connecting the rural and urban divide, that people didn't just come to Portland, they went to everywhere else. And so I would actively work to send leads out to the rural convention and visitor bureaus and chambers of commerce, just so that they can capitalize on getting those tourism dollars to their own communities. And so as a result, I've gotten to know the state very well. I have pretty much been to every single corner of Oregon, which is great because every single community has its own wonderful aspects to it. And, just the people and the communities, the culture and the natural beauty of it all.
Mm.
So I am a small business owner for the last 18 years. I have my own company called Pathfinder Writing and Career Services. And what I do is I help people with their careers, with resume writing and coaching on salary negotiations and helping them find their value and conduct job searches. And I've also coached businesses or people wanting to start businesses too. So it's all about economic, being able to earn your highest potential.
Right.
And that directly impacts the kind of life they live, what kinds of cars they buy, or how they want to live their lives, and the material things, and then the immaterial things too.
Well, it sounds like you're intimately familiar with everyday people's aspirations, what
I
they
am.
want their lives to shape up to be,
Hmm.
then also helping them perceive their inherent value, maybe things
Yes.
that they weren't, so it's almost like an audit of somebody. Is like, how honest are you? Are you giving yourself enough credit?
Correct. And I
And
see that a lot. A lot of
right.
people don't give themselves enough credit. So I don't never conflate or inflate their credentials. I just help them see their own value so that they feel more comfortable about seeking out jobs for which they're, better qualified for.
Yeah.
And just having that ability to really understand how this all connects with their sense of value and their economic status and that kind of thing. So I've been doing this for 18 years. Have helped over 5,000 people during that time. And the best part is that I've got to talk to people from pretty much every single market segment and every economic, social, and economic level. And I've also donated my time. I worked both in Portland and here in the Dells at WorkSource, Oregon. I donated my time as a volunteer career coach and also resume writer. So I was helping people that didn't have the means to pay for my services. So it's about uplifting everyone. And so that's been important to me. You got to give back to your community. So now it's just pretty much taking that same kind of, I want to help people, and then translating it to this district.
Well, it's a net benefit to everyone. I
Yeah.
mean, when you get deserving people into the jobs they should be doing,
Mhm.
that's the economy that we need. We don't
Yeah.
need people who are being shuffled around, from, one thing that they. Anyway, yeah, I think we could talk about this forever, but, what I
Yeah.
did want to say before we begin is it seems like maybe in some sense you are tuned with the ways in which an electorate's self-esteem can
Mhm.
impact their idea of themselves, what their community is capable of and things
Yep.
like that. And I'm not trying to paint you as a psychologist or anything like that.
I actually have been more or less a counselor in a lot of respects too.
Right.
So
Right. But it's a sensitive thing,
it
I
is.
mean,
It is.
in this country, because we are so work oriented,
Mhm.
this is not small stuff. This is
No,
wrapped up in our identity. And so
it is.
I just want to, throw you some accolades
Oh,
for
thank you.
that.
Thank you. Well,
So if it's okay,
sure.
unfortunately, I've limited our meeting to just 40 minutes.
Okay.
But But I think that this next question will be a nice open kind of platform for you to dive into a couple of things. So hopefully you won't feel too restricted by my format here.
No problem.
Um, why do you want to be this district's congressperson?
I want to be this district's congressperson and feel like I'm the most qualified to do that because I have such a strong baseline understanding, not only just the state from a firsthand perspective. I have traveled to every single corner of Oregon. I know the topography, I know the communities, I know a lot of the culture and nuances for each area. But I also have done that through my work, working with people in the careers industry. But I also worked as a workforce development coordinator with the Oregon Restaurant Education Foundation. So I work with 49 high schools around the state.
Wow.
So I've worked with businesses, I've worked with the media, I've worked with school districts, I've worked with teachers, I've worked with students and employers. So I kind of have my hands, deep into this with my sleeves rolled up. And what I'm not seeing from the current incumbent is someone who even cares about the district. And where I arrived at this decision to run for this role was I was getting very frustrated. The lack of representation, the lack of response, just the lack of respect for the Oregonians in CD2. And I just kind of came to a moment where I was very, very frustrated and feeling a lot of doom scrolling angst. And I realized I got to channel my energy into something positive. And I consulted with a friend of mine. He's a national speaker on government topics. And he actually was a Republican consultant for John McCain's presidential campaign.
Mhm.
And he's now a Democrat. And I said, "Hey, Roger, what do you think?" And he said, "Absolutely, you should do it." And so that kind of pushed me off the ledge. So I believe that with my background and my knowledge and my ability to listen and really just take a moment and see what's important to people, most people basically just want to work hard, provide for their families, and create a better life for themselves. And so that's kind of a question I've asked every single time I work with one of my career clients. And I think that's true. That's what unites all of us.
Yeah. It's a matter of dignity.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you a slightly tougher question.
Okay.
Why do you think a large contingent, and this is based off of my anecdotal experience and just
Mhm.
what I read and what I see, why do you think there's a large contingent of left-leaning voters, of young left-leaning voters? But technically, I think you could say that this is now inhabiting most age ranges. Why do you think they're skeptical of the Democratic Party as it stands today?
Well, I think I understand where they're coming from. They feel betrayed, number one, that,
Yeah.
the party principles are not necessarily being stood up by, people advocating for them. There's been a lack of leadership. And there's just not been engagement. And quite frankly, I think a lot of the younger left-leaning voters are pretty much like, well, we're going to wait and see if you're really the real deal, if you're really obviously going to follow through on your word, because they see a lot of that. They're told everything, they promise the world, and then that promise is broken, and they just feel left out and underrepresented. So I
Right.
think that is a huge problem. And so my goal is to reach out to those all those folks and say, "Listen, I'm the real deal. I understand what you're saying, and I believe that we do need to be the change that we want to see. And I'm willing to push against the party line if need be, because we have some major things that need to be addressed, and we can't be afraid." And a lot of folks that are in leadership in the Democratic Party are afraid at the national level. So we cannot afford to do that. This is our time to stand and be heard, and stand up for what we believe in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. Because I think a lot of what we're seeing from the party and the party leadership is, like you said, they're saying stuff, but there's some missing action there, and action is the penultimate thing at this
It
point
is.
for the younger voters, for first-time voters who are looking at this total circus and trying to
Mhm.
make heads or tails of it, who's to blame for the last quarter century, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Yeah.
who invented the situation that we're in? And the culpability is on both sides, but I think we can agree that when it comes to both sides, one is clearly on the side of representative democracy, whereas the
Correct.
other one seems to be marching to, let's say, a different beat. Um,
Yes. You're being very nice there.
well, and speaking of, they're
Yeah.
still Americans. They still
Yeah.
matter,
Yes, they do.
and when we make life better for organs in the second congressional district, we're making life better for independents and conservatives. So, how would you propose reaching out to those people without, you know, without capitulating? Obviously, I don't think that's the
Mhm.
conversation we're going to have here, but that outreach, I think, is going to be, obviously, is key in this demographic.
Well, it's not a matter of proposing to connect. I already am connecting with independent and conservative voters. I'm one of those people. What you see is what you get. I'm not disingenuous. I'm not going to say one thing to one group and go to another group and say something else just to
Right.
be a people pleaser.
Right.
But I realize that as red as this district is, there's also blue, and that's the representation pieces. You have to represent everybody. It's not like getting elected, you're only going to represent the Democrats or you're only going to represent the Republicans. It has to be representative democracy. So reaching out and connecting with independent and conservative voters has been pretty easy because I just listened. I asked questions. And I'm one of those people where I understand that compromise is not surrender. It's called governing.
Right.
And so what we need to do is to actually have conversations. And it may be that we need to avoid trigger language and finding that vernacular that we have in common. And if we can remove those triggers, then we can actually have a real conversation. So I ask questions and I listen. And I've always held that, I have my own morals and integrity and, accountability that I hold myself to. And it's a very tight rein, let me tell you. But if someone can give me a well thought out, factually supported, and civil argument, I will listen. And you may convince me, or at least if I don't actually come around 100% to their viewpoint, I'm going to learn something. And that is key to being a representative. You don't get to choose which side you're on, you have to represent the people. And so Harry S. Truman had a plaque on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." And I have one that I'm going to put on my desk that's going to say, "The people stop here." And that will guide my thinking every day. So I would be representing independent and conservative voters, Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else in between because it's for the common good.
Right. They're bringing their issues to you because you're going to carry that torch right up to where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, you've already been kind of involved in a variety of different lives on different parts of the state. And so when you are working to get people to work, you have to find out how they work. And
Right.
so
Right.
you were already intimately familiar with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the thought processes that you need to be, responsible to. I think that's
Right.
great.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you maybe a bit of a spicy question. Under
Okay.
what
Spicy's good.
Oh yeah, well, we've got a couple. Um, Under what circumstances would you accept corporate or PAC money?
I can tell you I will not accept corporate money and I will not accept APAC money. And I realize APAC is doing some very sneaky things, trying to siphon it into some dark money. So I am watching my donations like a hawk. And if somehow they manage to squirrel something in, I'm going to send it right back to them because I do not want that money. It's part of who I am as a person. I don't believe you need to go to Congress already bought and paid for. And we need to get rid of Citizens United because this is the corruption that is what makes up America's political process right now. In fact, I would love to see a situation where we could go to maybe the European style, like 3 month campaign period. I mean, this
Seriously.
protracted year and a half thing is huge waste of money, huge waste of resources. And, not that it's not important to reach out to people, but just the whole it's really difficult when you have money buying people's votes and it's not really being the authentic person reaching out to people. And money does cost. You do have to have campaign outreach. I mean, I'm traveling, I need to pay for my travel costs and our collateral and all that kind of thing. But the gross amount of money that's in this is just creating a very undemocratic process where
Yeah.
it's all about who has money, who doesn't. And I'm not someone who's wealthy. I'm digging in my savings right now, and this campaign itself, I planned on 25% time spent on the campaign. Then it went to 50. Now it's 75, and I'm sure in the next 2 months it'll be up to 100% of my time on the campaign. That's what's going to need, and that means me getting out more and more and more and more, which is important because people need to be able to meet me and hear what I have to say and make a choice for themselves if I'm the right
Right.
candidate. I believe I am, and I'm championing all the things that I believe are important that makes a good representative.
So
So
you're doing this the hard way. You're trying to get elected by votes and not by
yeah,
taking
well,
money.
and
Yeah.
people are sick
What
of
a
it. They
novel
think
idea.
I know, but you know what? That just makes me more scrappy. I mean, I do need money and I am spending it very, very frugally and wisely. So
Right.
I'm putting it where it has the biggest impact. But just the overall setup of where we are in the United States with elections and money being integrated into it, it's just wrong.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, well, speaking of, how we spend money, would you make your support for any foreign aid contingent on that given nation's adherence to international law and human rights? And I realize it's a minefield. I could be talking about any number of
Mhm.
situations. I'm not trying to paint you into a corner.
No, I'm happy to address that.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, this goes back to a saying my grandmother said is you don't want to be in a situation where you're saying, do as I say, not as I do. And so I think it has to start at home.
Right.
And when we are not adhering to international law and human rights in our own country with what's going on with the ICE
Mhm.
officers that are illegally detaining people, murdering people, and having physical abuse in addition to lack of due process. I mean, that's a whole, we are violating international conventions right now, this
Yeah.
country. So we have to deal with what's at home first before we can look at foreign aid for other countries. But, we have to look at how the structure of the America, or, America's participation in the world balance of power. And when we have a situation where we have traditionally been that line of defense and basically the beacon of hope for democracy around the world,
Right.
we need to be looking at how are we helping protect those safe points. Like Ukraine is a huge issue. Russia's obviously trying to exert their own plans for dominating the world power, and Ukraine is probably just a test case of how far they can push it, and that could be the domino effect of Europe, really.
Poland,
Yeah, and it
Belarus
goes
is
on and
already,
on and
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But yeah, so I think that we need to deal with our own problems first because we can't help anybody else if we can't deal with our own problems. And then
Right.
from there, then that would, once we get our own internal issues fixed, then absolutely we want to be, again, restore our standing in the world as the gold standard for, democracy, independence,
Right.
and international law and human rights. But
It's
like I
sort of
said,
like the safety card on airplanes. You got to put on your own oxygen
yes,
mask first,
exactly.
and then you
Yes.
can help
Hmm.
the person
Hmm.
next to you. Yeah, you can't help anybody if you can't breathe. Um, okay, so let's switch gears here. I know I'm all over the place, but I
Hmm.
just, I'm mindful of your time and
Okay, sure.
also my limited time on Zoom here.
Okay.
By the way, thank you so much. I appreciate you've been so open and your candor is so wonderful. So
Well,
I
thank you.
just
Well,
wanted to
that's like I
take a
say, what you
break to
see is what you
acknowledge
get.
that. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on AI specifically as it relates to the workforce? And then, we can, set this aside, but also energy and water consumption.
Well, I think in an unprecedented time of human development and technology. I just watched a video yesterday of these Chinese robots that can do like they can actually have kung fu fighting, and they were very dexterous, and it was pretty scary
We're,
actually.
we're so
So
screwed.
there's AI embedded in those robots, but
Right.
and they were actually fighting against human beings, so it's just amazing. But anyway,
Yeah.
I know. um,
I've seen that movie. It's
Okay, well, yeah.
anyway,
So AI can be very helpful and it is here to stay, I believe. But the real problem, and this is the concern that I have, is it is not regulated. It is spiraling out of control. And quite frankly, I read something the other day that said that it's now getting very close to self-consciousness. And so, what are we going to do when it does reach that? How are we training it to have a human touch versus the worst of humanity? That is, we see that a lot of that on the internet with trolls and just the hate speech and whatnot.
right,
How is AI picking up on that? How can we teach it to have that humane approach and have the good values of human beings? So, and just how fast it's growing and where it's growing, it's concerning. And that ties directly into the workforce. People are losing their jobs. I mean,
right,
my own business has been impacted. That was not the reason why I started this campaign. I was more worried about the political balance than anything else, but I've definitely seen a drop because people are using AI to write a resume.
right,
That's great, because that's some people cannot afford it to write a resume with a resume writer. So um it is definitely helpful. It is definitely changing. It is definitely not going away, but we have to find ways to rein it in, because if we don't control it, it will control us. And so,
right.
in addition to that, the consumption of water and energy, I have to ask questions like, are the data centers that are supporting the AI, are they being built to the most efficient standards possible, or are they being built for the cheapest standards that are possible? I mean, I live in the Dalles, and there are data centers here, and they're drawing from our aquifer, and to the tune of like 400 million gallons a year, and it's evaporative. And
Yeah.
so basically, we're boiling away our aquifer here. And I'm concerned because I'm on a well. My well's dropped down 15 feet, and I'm just upstream from that campus. So I'm personally affected by that, and I'm concerned. And when we have energy questions, there's a lot. We have to look at renewable energy without a doubt. And if we can plug that in and help negate some of the drain on the grid from AI and data centers, that's great.
Right.
But besides that, where's the money for our communities that have increased electricity need? And they're already talking about this summer we may have brownouts because there just isn't enough electricity. I mean, we got a lot. I support energy choice. So we have hydro, the solar, the wind power, and all that stuff. So if we can balance it out, we have to find ways to meet the needs of communities and our society. And things like when you remove one thing, you create another problem. So
Yeah.
for people who got rid of their gas car, they're now using electrical cars. Well, where do you think the energy comes to power up, charge your battery?
Coal,
So it's
nuclear, yeah, yeah,
we have to be smarter about this. So I think being cognizant of all the different contributing factors as it relates to AI, where we're going, just in general, the strategy behind it and the lack thereof, and then how is that going to impact our grids and our natural resources? Those are things that need to be examined very closely.
right,
I'm concerned about companies just going in, exploiting a local community's resources, and then moving on once they've drained it dry or run out of energy, and then go on to the next community. So we have to be smarter about
right.
this and balance the needs, because these are going not going away, and then we also need the jobs associated with them. So how do you put all this together? And that's really a comprehensive, in-depth dive on policy that I haven't gotten that far on, but I can see the
No, I
need to
mean
really dig
you're
into it.
way more up to date than a lot of, I mean, it's not that I talk to a lot of politicians, but I
Mhm.
talk to a lot of people that like to think they're engaged in these topics,
Mhm.
and you're there. And actually you said something earlier that made me, really cognizant of how all these things are tied together. people may not be able to perceive themselves as being able to afford a professional resume
Mhm.
writer,
Yeah, it's
but what they don't
accessibility.
realize is that 40 million gallons of water,
Hmm.
ChatGPT uses 39 million gallons of water per day.
Hmm.
That is an externalized cost that is
Hmm.
being placed on people that think they're getting, the artwork cheap or whatever, but they're
We're
actually
paying for
being
it. We are
robbed.
paying for it.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
So, thank you very much for that.
sure.
Let's move on to something a little bit more niche, but this one's important to me because
Hmm.
I like to explore. That's
Sure.
my happy place.
Yeah.
So when I first saw, the Hawaii Canyonlands and, Leslie Gulch and, the Alver Desert, and just I'm so in love with the environments that
Hmm.
the second congressional district contains. Um,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on closing off public land for potentially hazardous resource extraction? And in particular, I want to kind of touch on at least the gold cyanidation mine in Vail, Oregon, which I believe is like, what, 45 minutes east of Ontario, where
Hmm.
Cliff Bentz lives.
Correct.
Um, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Europe, it's largely regarded as, after Chernobyl, a gold cyanidation uh, dam broke loose, and that
I went
it
down, yeah, the river.
spoiled the entire river system. It was horrible.
Yep. I
I'm not
remember that
saying that
incident. Yeah.
that is bound to happen again, that the
Hmm.
industry may have changed, but it's still banned in Montana and I believe Wyoming. Um, so now that I've, rattled all that off, what are your thoughts on that?
And once you open that can of worms, right?
Where do we go from there? It's,
Well,
I mean,
so there's a lot of things here. I believe that public lands belong to everyone. And I believe that water in Eastern Oregon is very precious. We're seeing that in a lot of communities. I also believe that tribal consultation must be meaningful, not performative, and
right,
that job projections should be realistic, and that cleanup bonding must protect taxpayers so that they're not stuck with the bill. And I don't believe in backroom deals. So really, I don't believe in a blanket yes or a blanket no answers. I
right,
mean, every proposal should be evaluated on three things: real long-term job benefit, protection of water and habitat, and meaningful consultation with tribal nations and local communities, because they're going to be the ones who are affected. And if a project can meet those strong environmental standards, protect the groundwater in an arid region, as we know that is, and fully consult with tribes and guarantee taxpayers aren't stuck with that bill, then it does deserve serious review. But if it doesn't meet those standards, this can't be a corporate free for all. Another thing that kind of lands in there too is that, I think we need to look at the 1871 mining law. And so that's, we can't have a wild, wild west here. And so Republicans are actively engaged in efforts to loosen those mining regulations and essentially give away public lands and gut protections. And I am
right.
against that. So
Yeah,
I advocate for a balance, between securing critical minerals for a clean energy economy, job creation for struggling communities, because we all know a lot of Oregon communities just don't have any jobs whatsoever.
right,
But we also have to enforce strict environmental safety and community protections. So
right.
we really have to look at that 1871 mining law, or 1872, I think that's when it was, 1872 mining law, and then really try to make sure that it's going to safeguard all our resources and our people and our communities. But at the same time, we have to try to find ways to balance the need for jobs in these communities. I mean, I could talk specifically to John Day. I think they have like 1,700 people there. The
Right.
young people are just bailing out of that community. And in that case, they weren't doing a mine in John Day, but they were trying to add another mill there. And it just
Mhm.
ended up not being feasibly possible. And I talked to a young man who was at the subway there, and I said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I came back home because I thought there was going to be a job at the mill, which would pay really well." And now he said he's working at Subway, change of plans. So, a lot of these towns are aging out, and young people are deserting because there's just no jobs and no opportunity. So they're leaving, and so we have communities with crumbling infrastructure and aging populations. So what do you do? So it's a lot of different nuances. That's how I'll answer that question.
I no, I think that's a really good answer because you're right. There are so many different stakeholders sitting at the
Mhm.
table,
Yeah.
and to leave any of them out, honestly, is just asking for trouble, is just kicking the can down the road. These
Yeah.
communities were built on responsible resource extraction in a
Yeah.
lot of places, whether it was timber or
Yeah.
anyway, you get
And
it.
those days are over. So now
Those
what?
days are over.
So what do we do? That's the
Okay,
question du
so
jour.
using the most polite terms possible. I'm kidding. What are your thoughts on our congressperson, our incumbent Cliff Bentz?
I believe Representative Benz is basically a nice person, um, but politically, it's a missed opportunity. He has changed from, and I've talked to a lot of folks that served with him in the legislature here in Oregon when he was still in the legislature, and I've talked to personal friends of Cliff Benz. And they have noticed a marked change in him from his time at the Oregon legislature to being in DC. And he has become much more aloof. And I will quote a friend of his who no longer is voting for Cliff Benz. And his friend said he asked Cliff, what is it like being in Congress? And apparently Cliff's response was, it's like being in World War I. You stick your head out of the foxhole and you get shot at, and then you put your head back down. And I think that's probably the best metaphor for his whole candidacy in terms in Congress, because he's not doing anything brave. He's staying in that MAGA enclave because it's safe, and he's not willing to stand it. He's not spoken out about any of the ICE murders. He's not spoken out about Epstein files. He's not spoken out about any of the other things that are facing this country, that he is just lockstep with Trump. And he has hitched his wagon to a president that has plummeting favorability ratings, who is very clearly in deeply embedded in the Epstein files. So he's protecting a pedophile. And he's just not standing up for the people of Oregon. He will not meet with people in Oregon when they come to his office, or if he does, it's very cursory and abrupt. And he's been very arrogant with them, and they're noticing. And these are not just Democrats; these are Republicans as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he hit, between his own actions and lack of accessibility by not having the town halls and hiding behind hiding in his foxhole. This is a time of political bravery, not political safety. And he has chosen his pathway, and that's his right to do, but he's not representing the people of Oregon. And that's where I'm willing to challenge him and say, I call BS, because this is the time our country is most under threat by enemies that are not foreign, they're domestic. And he is absolutely not upholding his oath to the US Constitution, because he has not spoken up about any of these things or brought legislation against his own president. It's our president, of course, but he helped elect Trump and bring in some of his policies too. So I equate, at this point, he has not done anything to differentiate himself. So he is on board embracing Trump, and he's going to lose the seat because of that, because of his arrogance. And he thinks he's got a clear win. And I'm going to dispute that, because there's a lot of Republicans that have come up to me and say, you know what? I know you're a straight shooter. I know that you really are going to act on behalf of the people of Oregon, and Cliff is not doing that. I can't stand Cliff Bentz. So all I can say is, he had the opportunity to shine, and he has instead stayed in his foxhole. So that's great. He can do that, but it's going to result in him losing this seat. And I'm pretty charged up about that, because I know we can do much, much better. It's a very low bar that he set.
Yeah, Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, it shouldn't be too much of a thing, a hurdle, but you know, you've essentially answered my last question, but I want to close with a kind of, brief meditation on how your constituents will know that you are serving them effectively.
Well, I think, people feel that you're actually working with them if you meet them at their level. And again, notwithstanding my previous statements about the current incumbent, but my approach is that yes, I am going to meet people at their own level. And that means, they wrote the U.S. House of Representative role in the Bill of Rights to be a position that turns over every 2 years. And that intention was to force the representatives out into the public and be talking to people and learning, because it's more of a responsive thing than the 6 year term of the senators. And so it's really important that we get in there and focus on talking to people, asking questions, being present, being accountable. For example, Cliff Bentz, people are writing and calling him. There's no response. If they do get a response, it's a form letter that comes weeks later and doesn't even address whatever their concern was. So that just means it's basically saying, I don't care about you. Just take this form letter and take it as a response. And people are not that stupid. They can see through the BS.
Yeah.
And so when they see that I'm responsive, I understand, and I genuinely care, what you see is what you get. I'm fighting for this district, and I understand that every community has a different story. Every community has its own nuances, but at the same time, it's possible that we can come together and solve the big problems in front of us by just listening and talking with each other. And I just wanted to mention, if you haven't heard of it, there's this group called Braver Angels. And it is a group of Democrats and Republicans that are coming together. It's a national organization. I belong to the Columbia Gorge Alliance chapter. And it's about sitting down and actually talking with each other again. Most Americans are right in the middle. We just have to get rid of all of this partisan bickering that we've been, pitted against each other. So we're so busy fighting each other that we're not watching the man behind the curtain raiding the cash register. And so we have to come together. And again, like I said, compromise is not surrendering. It is called governing. And so that's where we need to sit down, roll up our sleeves and say, okay, we're going to fix this. And if we can work it out that everybody gets a slice of a win, that's much better than someone trying to aim for 100% and getting nothing.
Right. A non-zero sum game.
Correct.
Thank you so much for your time. You have been such a wonderful person to speak with,
Thank you.
and
I
I'm
appreciate
really looking forward to seeing where your campaign goes. I am going to be following it with great eagerness. Um, I can't tell you what it means to me that you were willing to do this, especially my first time out the gate. But
that. Great.
yes, you were wonderful. Thank you so
Well,
much, Don.
thank you for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed it.
Good, good. I'm glad. Well, let's speak again soon, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.